Seeking excellence at its core is that human fulfillment is going to be found at striving to be great in all the meaningful areas of our lives, not just picking and choosing the ones that come more natural to us or that we're more interested in succeeding in.
This is Virtuous Leaders, the podcast for based Catholics who will speak truth, do good, or die trying. Here's the show. You're the founder of Seeking Excellence. Just curious, what is that?
Yeah, so Seeking Excellence, I started 5 years ago. It really was a fruit of the pandemic. And so during the pandemic, everybody remembers how fun 2 weeks to slow the spread, the lockdowns were. I'm sure all of us reflect on it as just the best time of our lives, right? But there were some great fruits that came out of the pandemic, although there was a lot of suffering and difficulty as well. But two things for me. One was starting Seeking Excellence. The other was I met my wife kind of in the process of starting Seeking Excellence too. And so a lot of good that came out of that time of suffering, difficulty, and a lot of loneliness for me at the time. But when the 2 weeks to slow the spread, when the lockdowns began, I started doing what I called holy happy hours online. And so that was kind of the starting phase. It's kind of like what we call theology on taps, which are essentially young adult faith-oriented events. And so I would have a priest, a woman, and myself on a Zoom webinar for about an hour, and we would drink and talk about a topic. And so it was kind of like a thing where we talk about what we were drinking, what kind of cocktail or whatever we might be having that night. And then we'd be talking about overcoming your fears or developing a prayer life. And did them for 6 weeks. The sixth and final guests were my priest who married us and my wife, my future wife. And we had just kind of met through this process of me putting these events on. But about 4 months after that, I started the podcast. So in August of 2020, started the Seeking Excellence podcast. So just launched as kind of a place for me to get some thoughts out, express myself. Really was almost selfish in that I was really clarifying a lot of my views and opinions on things through the process. And then I had this vision for it of just wanting to expand into coaching, community, and creating more and more content. And so over the last 5 years, been kind of slowly adding to that and getting that to come to fruition. And so I've started a coaching program this year in January of 25. I launched that. Last summer, I launched my online locals community. And then I've just been increasing the content through YouTube, social media, and the podcast, as well as doing more and more speaking engagements. So speaking mostly at men's conferences. I do some corporate speaking as well. And soon I'm rolling out an executive coaching program too. So I'm very excited about that.
If there's only one message that you can express to your audience, what is that?
Yeah, Seeking Excellence at its core is that human fulfillment is going to be found at striving to be great in all the meaningful areas of our lives, not just picking and choosing the ones that come more natural to us or that we're more interested in succeeding in. And so that I would say is kind of the fundamental message, is that it's based on Aristotle's great quote where he says that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. And I think in today's world, we think a lot of times, oh, I'm a good person because I used to do this, or because my parents raised me this way, or because I've got my master's degree. And it's like, well, that's great. You might be making a lot of money. You may be successful in one area of your life, but if we look under the hood, we can see that a lot of people, may on the exterior look really successful, or feel really successful, but might be on the verge of divorce, might be physically in ruin, might be mentally all over the place and not good at, regulating their emotions and having outbursts on other people or their family at home. And so I think that's what I really try to teach people, is that it's these pillars of excellence that build the entirety of an excellent life. That is really the thing I think that all of us are searching for.
Pillars of excellence?
Yeah. So I have these 6 pillars basically. So I've kind of broken down into these 6 different categories of life. So mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial, professional. For me, coming from a person of faith, I kind of look at them as my end of life report card. And so I'm like, what has God given me to steward and to be exceptional and to be intentional in? And so I think about these kind of main areas that I think all of us have. Like, even if you're not really somebody who's not even deep in their faith, can still realize that they're still given a mind, you're still given a body, you're still given, emotions, heart, relationships, you're still given a soul, you're still given professional life that you have to cultivate and to do what you want with, and then also finance it. And I think that we're ultimately going to be judged in how we kind of steward ourselves in these 6 areas. And you can see also over time that all 6 categories are very interrelated. And so if I have serious financial problems, is one of the top causes of divorce in the United States. And so thinking about that, like budgeting and just being on top of that, planning for my future retirement is not just something I do because I want to be financially successful, but it's because I don't want that added stressor in my relationship and my family life, and for my kids to be worried and nervous that they don't know if we're going to be able to live in our house or afford our next meal. So all of that really does kind of tie in. And then obviously financial problems are a huge cause of mental health stress and depression and those sorts of things. So all of it really is correlated, and has been largely driven from my own experience growing up without seeing excellence in most of these really important areas.
I'm curious to just get more into the hustle of what you do. So you mentioned you started this locals community. What inspired that, and how's that been going? What do you think, I guess more generally, has been the most successful business decisions you've made?
For sure. Yeah. Locals is an interesting one, and really driven out of this point that I had been doing the podcast for a few years and was like, okay, it was all fun and games as it being a hobby when I was young and single and, made enough income. It didn't need the extra money or whatever. But as I got older and then got married, we now have two children, but really after we had our first, start to realize like, okay, stepping away on Wednesday night to record podcasts, scheduling with guests, doing stuff on Saturdays. It's not as fun when you have mouths to feed. You have a very expensive Denver mortgage. And so it was really at that point that I started the locals as an opportunity for people who had been, listening to the podcast for years and wanted to support us financially in some way, just to kind of cover our costs. And at least I got to the point where I was like, it at least can't be a drain on my family. It's one thing if it's not profitable, but it can't be a drain. But I did have this vision or dream, and I still have this vision or dream of someday full-time doing Seeking Excellence work, because it is the most fulfilling and something that I feel like God has really placed on my heart to want to do. And so that was really the start of it. I'll say along that, I was building kind of the speaking side, and I made some intentional investments in 2024 to go through a speaking coaching program that was really focused on building your speaking business and not just doing it kind of as a hobby and being passive about the opportunities that came my way. But I would say kind of a combination of those three things is really hard to kind of nail it down because they're all pretty similar. The coaching program, very similar, and just kind of getting that started and getting that rolling is another income stream. But the way that I view it with all of them, I think speaking is really the kind of top of funnel. And so I would say doing the speaking coaching program was probably the most impactful business decision that I made, because it's speaking and getting in front of people and having them have a powerful experience with me for 45 or 90 minutes, whatever it might be, in a speaking opportunity that can drive locals, that can drive the coaching program. And so that one I think is really important to kind of invest. And I'm a sales manager by day as well. And so I know the importance of driving top of funnel into the rest of it. And so I really had to get down thinking about, Gary Keller, the book, The One Thing, really working to figure out like, what is my one thing that if I'm successful here and I put enough time and resources into this, I'll be successful in the rest of it. I believe that thing is speaking for me.
Why did you pick locals?
That's a good question. I think that Patreon is like kind of the OG community builder, right? And so I had heard a lot of things about Patreon, and it was in 2020 that I was starting to do all of this. And there were people who were speaking out against certain political agendas, certain societal moves in Patreon in 2020 specifically, whether it be George Floyd or, stuff to do with pharmaceuticals, let's say, that I had heard them restricting payments, that they had started to turn people off and all those kinds of things. So my understanding basically was that locals was started as a response to that, as a more free speech oriented platform. And so because I have certain opinions and things that I share and promote and values that are not always in line with the world's ideology, then I thought it was really important for me to have a platform that was going to be more flexible and open with me saying what I believe versus being nervous about, not crossing a certain topic because I was afraid the Patreon was going to come and, cancel me or something like that. And so that was kind of the drive behind that. They're pretty similar, I think, in what they offer and things. But yeah, that was really the main reason for it.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, man. I'm a big believer in values aligned businesses. That's why I canceled my Chase bank account and stopped using PayPal. What is the most cancelable view that you express?
The most view I express. That's a good question. I would say, I shared Catholic values, and so I think that always can be something that gets you in trouble from the position that I have on abortion, being pro-life, being pro-traditional marriage, against gender ideology, transgenderism, especially meaning being against that, meaning that I don't want it forced on society, that I don't think it's good to promote it to society. I took a somewhat contrarian view, especially like I've done deep dives into like BLM. I'm pretty anti BLM as an organization. Done some deep dives into that, diving into specific cases that they really rally behind, probably most notably Mike Brown's case, and being against the outrage that exists behind that. I would say also cancelable in the world. I'm not somebody who is, and even in the Catholic world, I think this would be kind of controversial. I'm not like a hard line, women should stay home, but I do think it's the ideal that
Yeah.
mothers of young children are the primary caretaker of those young children. I think that biology and society and tradition have established that as a pretty good basis or rule for life, or at least an ideal that we should strive for. I recognize that it's financially difficult in today's world. So, yeah, I got into some stuff, especially in the Catholic world with Pope Francis, but the world doesn't care about criticizing Pope Francis back when he was doing some controversial things. But I would say just kind of those general things. I know that especially people who were, we don't necessarily follow the prescribed medical treatment for children, let's say. And so talking about those sorts of things sometimes can get you canceled. It definitely got people canceled in 2020 in the midst of the coronavirus. And so some of those contrarian views, I think, are, yeah, can be really, can get you in some trouble in the right or wrong audiences.
All right, man, you're checking all the boxes. I think I agree with everything you said and more. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there's more aligned there that I didn't hit on.
okay, so the locals make sense. Okay, you said you invested in how to build speaking as a business. What would you learn from that?
Yeah, so I went through this great program. It's called the Speaker Lab, and really, not an affiliate or anything of the program, but I really loved it. If anybody's out there learning about or looking to learn about becoming a speaker, I really encourage you to check it out. You can start with their book. I forget, Grant Baldwin is the guy's name, and he wrote a book. I forget the name of his book. It's not called the Speaker Lab, but he's got a great book that kind of summarizes the kind of main point. They use this speak analogy, which is like kind of selecting your niche, establishing yourself as an expert is the E. I know I missed P. I can't remember what that was. K is knowing when to scale, and A is like acquiring paid speaking gigs. And so I know that I didn't spell the word right there. I was just trying to, the letters I remembered, but the thing that was really great about it, I would say, is just getting the opportunity to learn from people who had made the transition. So for me, I was trying to transition from being like, okay, I have, 4 to 6, sometimes 8 Catholic speaking engagements a year. How do I get that into the corporate world? And how can I translate that experience and really start to build that up? And so in the Catholic world, you can have this kind of weird thing. I think it's because a lot of Catholics are anti-capitalism, and even though some of them won't outright say that. And that's definitely a somewhat controversial take that I can have in the Catholic world, is that I think capitalism is amazing. I think that we underestimate it. I have Catholic hot takes on, I think sometimes we abuse nonprofits, and you have people who are getting wealthy on nonprofits, which I don't agree with and think is good. And that can be a whole rabbit hole to get into in the financial world. But for me, just being a believer in capitalism, believing in sales, believing in the goodness of promoting good ideas, being compensated for it, I wanted to learn from people who had done that and made that transition and built a speaking career. And some of their success stories are crazy, which I hope to be one of them, is implementing the program and in a year or 2 years making 6 figures and above, sometimes multiple 6 figures in speaking. And so it's just something you can scale really well. And I think in our world today, where you have so much flexibility as entrepreneurs, there's so many different things we can do. People underestimate some of those things that can be really high impact, but not take a ton of your time. Or like Alex Hormozy is one of my favorite, voices in business. And like, how can you create something once and sell it multiple times? Well, that's what a lot of people do with keynotes. They developed and craft a really good keynote talk. And then if you can sell that for $5,000, $10,000, 20 times after that, and you spent 2 days creating it, and it takes you, the time it takes to travel to an event, most of which are pretty awesome on the corporate and secular side. You're getting paid pretty well. You're getting to go to fun places if you're doing leadership retreats and things like that. So I was like, to me, that's a very good investment of a few $1,000s to go learn about how to scale from, $15,000 in speaking events to $100,000 to $200,000 in speaking events. But I don't think a lot of times we value some of that non-traditional education and formation that can come in the form of training or coaching.
What's the single most impactful piece of advice for you in that area?
Whew, man, I would say that there's two that come to mind. And so I know it's not the single most, but as far as the actual like speaking, the profession, the by far the most impactful thing was their process that they showed and this kind of document exercise they provided for how to develop a really good talk. I think that before I always really relied on talent. Like I can be comfortable in front of people. I can go up on stage, kind of ad hoc or get thrown into Q&A and be like very comfortable and excited to really enjoy it and bring energy on stage. I don't get as nervous as some people do or dread it like a lot of people do. And so I would just kind of rely on that, I think, in my early days because it's like, oh, I can do that. Just a few bullet points. I podcast, right? So I always have stuff to talk about. But when they talked about, no, dude, like you should script out your entire talk and you should go through these different points and wrestle with it in these ways and just showed me really how to refine it in a great way. I still don't even do all of that every time, but even just like amplifying and just showing me what
Yeah.
excellence looked like in preparing a talk has taken me to just this new level of like, I would just do these really detailed outlines. And I just noticed like when I really studied them and made the real outline, I used to feel like it restricted me, but now I'm like, no, it actually makes you not suck because you're not bouncing all over the place and rabbit holing and getting confused and lost, which obviously is also a business thing. But I think that was kind of the more speaker side. I would say that their approach to how just the really simple is not really revolutionary and how to reach out to companies and organizations and like giving you the freedom to do that was something that was also on kind of the business side of it really, really helpful. Just giving some framework to be like, this is who you want to try to reach out to. This is how to find good events for you, how to like broaden to your search to know what to look for and all that kind of stuff on the corporate side. Cause I didn't really know what that looked like before. So that was also really helpful.
Okay. Anything else we haven't covered that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess the only other thing I would say is I just encourage people to start and to think a little bit bigger than they currently are. If they're on the verge of doing any type of side hustle or business idea or whatever it might be, I think that there's always these extremes that people operate in. A lot of times, we struggle going back to Aristotle to find that virtuous middle, the mean and the virtue. And I think that a lot of times when I've talked to people, especially recently, or like my coaching clients and things, I had a conversation with a client recently who was projecting out. We do these 10, 5-year, 1-year goals in one of the sessions, casting, like working on a vision for our lives. And he was talking about how like, oh, like my goal is in 10 years to make, $150 or $170,000. I'm like, dude, I don't want to, make you materialistic or, think you're thinking about money too much. But he was like, I know it's kind of a stretch. I was like, that is not a stretch for you. You are an amazing human being. You're already very successful, already making a really good income at a really young age. I'm like, dude, you need to be thinking a little bit bigger than that. I don't want you to get, thinking that income is the only thing that's important, that you shouldn't be a present husband and father and all of those things. But encouraging people sometimes just to dream bigger and think bigger, because one of the key questions I think in today's world, especially when it comes to finances, and I talk about this a lot in my financial coaching specifically, which is part of the Excellent Life program, is this great thing that came, my biggest takeaway from Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor Dad is shifting from saying I can't afford this to how can I afford this. And I think the same thing goes for all of our dreams in life. Just not saying like, oh, I can't lift 225 pounds, or I can't run a marathon, or I can't get this promotion at work, or I can't get married, or I can't have a happy marriage. We have all these fixed mindsets and limiting beliefs that are really not what God wants for us in our lives. And it's not what we ultimately want in life. And if we just are willing to break that mold and say, how can I afford this? How can I create a happy marriage out of the situation that I'm in? How can I get the promotion at work? It actually forces you and opens up your creativity to think of ways to achieve the things that you want, not just be accepting of the fact that, oh, I can't have this, or it's difficult to afford a house right now, but actually saying, well, how can I afford a house? If I want to buy a house, I want my kids to grow up in the backyard. How can I make that happen? And actually brainstorming and thinking of ways to do that and being open to the possibilities that come to mind then, because so much more is possible than we really think of or imagine, I think.
Absolutely. Well, let's keep seeking excellence. Thank you, Nathan. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. See you next time.